Just to start off, at what point in your life growing up did you get the urge to be a performer?
Gee, I started very young when I was living in Melbourne in Canterbury. I started with a ventriloquist doll when I was about 7 or 8 or something like that. Went on television doing my ventriloquism, and it started from that. That was the buzz I got from performing in front of people, particularly television. And then I know what started me into music. Oh, obviously I was listening to a lot of music at home with my family. We used to have music on all the time. Everybody in the family loved music, so there was this competition in a local toy shop to create something, and I actually made a kit of drums using saucepan lids for cymbals and whatnot, painting them gold, and I created this kit out of cardboard and bits and pieces of stuff that I found in Dad's garage. And then I had to go on television. Oh, I won the competition, so I had to go on television and actually play the drums. And I started taking lessons, and I think I formed a band when I was about 11, 12.
Wow.
First band.
Any vocal training at all?
Yes. Yeah, I used to learn in Melbourne from a lady called Voila Ritchie, who actually taught John Farnham and a couple of the New Seekers around the time. So I used to learn from her for a couple of years, but then I stopped. I just sort of went my own way with my vocals, and now I actually have to take master classes.
Oh wow. You've involved yourself in so many musical styles over the years. What music had the greatest impact on you growing up?
Well, then and still today, I guess my favourite artist of all time is a guy called Scott Walker from, I don't know if you remember a band called the Walker Brothers.
Yeah.
And he's just had a new album released, and he's still my favourite, and probably he was the biggest influence on me as I was growing up. Not just the voice, I mean, he had a beautiful rich baritone voice, but the whole rock image, he still to me looks like the greatest rock star that ever lived. He had it over Jim Morrison and Michael Hutchins and Mick Jagger and David Bowie. He had it over everybody, and in fact he influenced all of those people. But round the home, there was always beautiful melodic pop music. I guess Dad listened to Sinatra and Mum listened to Peggy Lee, and we listened to whatever, as kids we listened to whatever else was happening in the day. The Beatles and Stones, and so I had a wide variety of music rattling through my ears growing up in Australia.
So what was the path that led you to join a band such as Kush?
Actually, prior to Kush, I was working, from 12 onward, I just sort of moved from band to band. One of the early bands when I was a young teenager was a band with a trumpet and a saxophone, and we were playing Blood, Sweat and Tears songs, fairly primitive versions of Blood, Sweat and Tears songs, Spinning Wheel and You Made Me So Very Happy. And I had a sort of a similar, if not youthful, range, which was comparable to David Clayton Thomas, the singer of Blood, Sweat and Tears. And at the same time, there was a big band in Melbourne, which was run by John Ellis, who would become the leader of the horn section in Kush, and they were cutting down this big band, which was like a 20-piece big band, down to a smaller Blood, Sweat and Tears type lineup, which was 5 horns, 2 trumpets, 2 saxes, and a bone, and a 5-piece rhythm section. And they were, I don't know where I heard, but I heard they were auditioning for singers at this office block in Kew in Melbourne. And anyway, I thought I'd go along. I think I was only about 17. And I got the job singing with, they were called Kush right from the outset. And it was mainly a musicians band, you know, like it was a home for musicians.
Yeah.
So I was the oddball, you know, the odd one out, because I was really, really very much into the visual thing as well as the singing thing.
Yeah, well, the image you portrayed out front of that band was certainly eye-catching, and probably not one that people would associate with that type of music that the Kush played. How did the image work for you in terms of attracting an audience for the band?
Well, initially it was I don't know. I don't think the musicians particularly enjoy the musicians in the band, because you know, they were still basically a jeans and t-shirt combination, and you know, I was making leotards and wearing dresses and lots of makeup and stuff on stage, and the audience were probably you know, really shocked at first, but then, you know, like, it became that style of dressing that I had and the style of costumery on stage became an integral, if not an integral part of the band, but also probably the biggest part of the band, my image. And although, you know, the music was always, you know, predominantly important for the audience, when people came along to our shows, it was, you know, they knew they were going to be in store for you know, a visual spectacular, and in the long run, the band ended up wearing costumes as well.
The two albums are soon to see re-released on CD for the first time. That must be a great feeling for you.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's probably a lot of people that had the original vinyl albums that are looking forward to hearing, you know, remastered versions. I'm sure the vinyl things have worn out, and particularly Snow White. That was, you know, like, I was just in Melbourne on the weekend. There's always people that bring in a copy of the vinyl album wanting me to sign it. So that's probably long overdue. And the second album, and also lots of previously unreleased B-sides and singles that were recorded as well. So I don't know what's going to happen. I mean, I'm always in touch with a couple of the horn players from Kush when I come down to Melbourne. You know, maybe there's a reformation in the air.
Oh, that'd be wonderful.
Yeah, I don't know if it'd be. I suppose all the originals are still they're all still playing, but it's amazing when that happens, because I think, you know, although everybody's a lot older, I think all the baggage that was possibly there when the bands were going through the trials and tribulations of formation have probably gone away, because people are older and wiser, and also probably better musicians if they've all been playing.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a possibility that could happen, the reformation. You know, I mean, I've never stopped playing some of the Kush songs, actually. I still, in fact, on Saturday night at Bennett's Lane there in Melbourne, I finished off my set with MacArthur Park, which is a song that Kush used to do.
That's right, yeah.
And we even did a jazz version of Living on Easy Street as well.
Fantastic. Which of the two albums holds up best for you today?
I guess Snow White, because it was, you know, that was the album that set up the whole Kush sound, and you know, although I'm probably, you know, like, if I'm honest with the re-release, I'd still say I'm probably a little embarrassed about my singing, but you know, it happens to a lot of bands from the 70s. You know, when their stuff is reissued or re-released, they have to have to wear it. I'm sure a lot of the musicians probably think, oh gee, I could have played better than that. But you know, I think that they have to remain untouched, and as they were released back in the 70s, you can't go repairing things.
Was there anything in particular that led to the split of the band?
You know, it was quite a big band for the day. I mean, as far as number goes and personnel, I think, you know, it was 10-piece, and it was pretty hard to maintain back in the 70s. I think we were probably one of the biggest in number working bands around Australia, and we were touring a lot. And when we did the second album, we were thinking of cutting back some of the horns. It just seemed a little bit unnecessary for the songs we were writing. So we ended up cutting 3 of the horns. Actually, no, we ended up with just one sax player who doubled on quite a few instruments. And I think eventually we just realised that we were losing what Kush actually started as. You know, it became a rock band with one horn, sax player, and it was a long way away from what we'd originally started, which is okay. I mean, I guess that's what happens in the evolution of a band. But also, when guys started dressing up, I mean, not as much as me, but they started getting into this image thing. It started getting a little bit too silly. You know, people wearing roller skates on stage, and I was thinking, oh, people are just dressing up for dressing up's sake. They're not really. I didn't feel as if they were really doing it because it was part of their personality. You know, it was more a forced thing because, you know, keeping up with me, I think.
So when you left Australia to go to England, was it more a case of England being the attraction, or a feeling of wanting to get away from Australia? Yeah, a little bit of getting away from Australia, but also I was really mad keen on the whole punk thing, coming from the background of music that I'd been listening to, you know, i.e. Scott Walker and, you know, Righteous Brothers, all of the beautiful pop songs of the day, you know, the Phil Spector sound and all that, and incredible singers. I did a complete about-face and fell in love with the whole anti-music thing of the punk movement in the mid-70s of London, where, you know, there was literally 2 or 3 chord songs with singers that couldn't sing. But to me that was really exciting, and it was so opposed to what I'd been brought up on that it became an attractive thing for me. So I just wanted to get over there and be a part of it. And I remember one of the guys that originally worked at Warner Brothers, who released the Snow White album, a guy called Laurie Dunn. He was working at. He'd left Australia and gone over to work with Richard Branson's company, Virgin Records, and he was looking after, and in fact toured with the Sex Pistols. So he came back to Australia, and he had all these goodies, all these records that I'd never heard of from power pop bands and punk bands, like the Stranglers and XTC and early Elvis Costello, Ian Dury and people like that. And I just fell in love with it all. I thought, oh gee, I have to get over there. And he bought some clothes back too, some stuff from the shop which was called Sex in the King's Road, which Malcolm McLaren, who was the manager of the Sex Pistols, he bought some of these clothes back and gave me some of them. I thought, wow, I'd love to wear all this stuff. You know, it was just sort of designer punk, ripped T-shirts and tartan trousers and things, and kilts and things. And I thought, gee, I have to get over there. So my manager at the time, Ray Hearn, said, well, let's just try and earn some money and get you over there. So I toured around
Australia, mainly just on my own. I remember I toured with Little River Band on my own, and Skyhooks on my own, just with backing tapes and store mannequins and blow-up dolls and things on stage. Just me and all these props singing songs that I'd written, and still a couple of Kush songs, MacArthur Park and stuff. And I released, that's right, I got signed to Mushroom, and I released a single called Temptation's About to Get Me, and that sort of...
That's right.
Gave me enough motivation to continue on. It's, ironically, Temptation's About to Get Me was almost like a Walker Brothers, like a Scott Walker song.
Mm-hmm.
So from that to a few months later, the landing in London. And I was doing Countdown a lot too, and I was still pretty popular on all the Australian television shows, I guess because of the way I looked, and my stage antics got me in a bit of trouble in Australia.
How welcoming did you find the music community when you got to England?
Well, welcoming, I don't know if that's the word. I mean, it was dog eat dog. I mean, there were so many punk bands and punk clubs starting and already established in London in 78 when I arrived, and there was a whole anti-punk movement from, at the same time in London there was, and there always has been, a lot of, the reggae thing too. A lot of the punk thing crossed over into the reggae thing, and I sort of got caught up in the whole movement. I ended up moving in with Laurie Dunn from Virgin Records. I lived in a house there with Laurie and the head accountant for Virgin Records. So, I was taken to all these gigs. It used to be called ligging, when your name would be on the guest list of a show, and you didn't have to pay it again. That was ligging, and Laurie and Barry and myself became what we'd call ace liggers, where we'd go to, we'd just go to a million gigs in a night, because our names would be left at them, mainly because Laurie and Barry worked at Virgin Records, and every band in the UK, well, even in America, wanted to be signed to Virgin Records, so we'd end up going to all these free shows all the time. Some of them were not very musical, and some of them were, the most exciting things I'd ever seen, but it was just a great variety of punk and reggae, and I loved it. I was, I just wanted to be, sucked up into the vortex of, the whole British punk thing.
Mm. And, is that true? You got yourself thrown out of the Stiff Records office?
Yeah. Actually, I was just telling somebody last night, because they're asking me if I liked Elvis Costello, and I said yeah. And then I told them the story. I said I went. What I had when I arrived from Australia was I just had backing tapes that I'd made with actually Icehouse. They were my last backing band in Australia before I left to go and live in London. I was a bigger name than, they were called Flowers at the time. I don't know if you remember. Yeah. And I'd double up with them, and it would be Flowers featuring Jeff Duff. So Ivor and co would have to sing, Give Me Back Me Brain as backing vocals for these songs that I'd written. So I just took backing tracks, and I'd just call up these record companies and just say, I'd act as if I was my manager. By then I'd taken on the name of Duffo. That was my name, and I'd just say, I'm Duffo's manager, and I'm bringing in a new hot act from Australia, and I'd like you to listen to him. So I'd just come in. I'd put I'd usually wear an overcoat or something, and underneath I'd have some weird clothing underneath. I'd take off the overcoat after introducing myself as Duffo's manager, and then I'd jump on the table and start singing live with the backing tapes. I mean, it was pretty crazy stunt, and most of the time I'd get thrown out of the record companies, including Stiff. And but one label really liked my Gall Beggars Banquet, and they signed me. So, but they couldn't believe I took a press kit of all my happenings in Australia, and my press kit was filled with all these. Like I don't know if you remember, but I got so much press in Australia. You know, I was still playing sport when I was appearing on Countdown, and so there are all these articles about me, you know, because I'd be wearing makeup and stuff while on the football field or the cricket field. So I got arrested in Australia for offensive behaviour once on stage. So there's a front page article. There's a lot of press about me, you know, being naughty basically on stage, and I showed Beggars Banquet this, and they couldn't believe that it was real. So they were based in Earl's Court, which is a very, very Australian area of London. They went round asking all these Australian people living there if all this stuff was true about Jeff Duff, and of course they said yes, he was a bit of a rascal in Australia. So they were even more impressed. Yeah. You know, being the punk days, you know, anything notorious was good.
You got yourself in trouble on the steps of Number 10 Downing Street too, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, I continued on for a little while being, you know, the infant terrible. And yeah, that was a stunt. Actually, Beggars Banquet, because of my press kit from Australia, they thought, oh, you know, Duffo will do anything. So they said, we'll take you out the front of Number 10 Downing Street. We need a big press story for you signing to Beggars Banquet. And I had this flesh-coloured body stocking on underneath a jacket or something. And I took it off and started running around out the front of Number 10 Downing Street, and people thought I was naked. I wasn't naked because I think it was the middle of winter. It would have been freezing. Anyway, some passers-by complained, and all of a sudden the police had pulled up behind me and arrested me and taken me to Cannon Row, which is the one of the central police offices in London, and I was made to stand there. And also, when this happened, the record company, you know, they got some great photographs, but they ran off. They ran off and just left me there. And the police made me stand in the middle of the police station while all these, you know, two-bit thieves and hookers and stuff were being hauled in for whatever, you know, the misdemeanors of the night. And then they took me down to the cells, and they said, if you don't plead guilty, you're going to spend a bit of time in the cells here. And I was freaking out. I was thinking, oh no, they're going to deport me or lock me up. And, you know, I was only young and I didn't know. I thought I was in big trouble. Anyway, I ended up going to court, which ended up a complete farce. It was so funny, the court case, because they didn't really know what to charge me with, because I wasn't naked. So, and I wasn't really disturbing anybody. It was just like a publicity stunt that had gone wrong. So I think I got fined £60 for insulting behaviour, something like that.
Oh dear.
But it was a great photograph and good press. Although I don't know whether it was good press, because it started me on this you know, like it was more notorious once again, and you know, it sort of killed off a little bit of my musical credibility.
Well, the English music press are notorious for being extra hard on Australian acts. How did you get along with them?
The same. Yeah. They, you know, there are all these comparisons, as most Australians got, including the Bee Gees and who else was happening? Men at Work, all these bands, and In Excess, Midnight Oil, they all got compared to Skippy the Bush Kangaroo. That was, you know, the British press have got wicked sense of humour, and you know, they'd rip into most Australian acts. I think even AC/DC suffered with that early on. You know, I know because I lived there. I remember when Midnight Oil came over, they really struggled. They were doing a Monday night residency, Midnight Oil, just up the road from me in a club called the Zigzag Club. I've got a pretty good memory because I remember, nobody would go to their shows, and I remember seeing Chisel too at Marquee, and the only people who would go there would be expat Australians.
Yeah.
It was the same for a lot of the Australian bands until, I guess, Men at Work, had that hit with Down Under, and In Excess started having their big stadium concerts and stadium hits. But I think there's still a little bit of feeling about Australian acts that do well in the UK. They don't want to accept that that they're good. I'm talking about the press, the media.
Yeah.
It's a media bash up. I got bashed up by the media all the time. Once again, though, I became notorious, doing the television and stuff that I did. It was always really over the top. I remember the first television show I did, I was on a show called The Old Grey Whistle Test, which was the biggest live rock show on BBC television. I went on dressed in cling film, glad wrap. That's what I'd wear, and I put my band in these pink boiler suits. I was asking for it.
Yeah. You had your own club over there for a while, didn't you?
Yeah. In Chelsea, in the King's Road. It's hard to believe now that, that anybody like me, who was probably more infamous than famous, but the infamy brought about, opened a lot of doors. I used to go down to the King's Road. There was this club called Kennedy's. It was actually just opposite Malcolm McLaren's shop in the King's Road. They'd have a little duo or trio singing there in this restaurant, and I'd go in there for something to eat, and they recognised me and asked me if I get up and sing, and I did. And then I'd go in more and more frequently until audiences had come in asking if I was performing. And once again, it was pretty over the top. I had a really long microphone lead. I'd go out into the middle of the street and start singing and stopping cars, and I was pretty crazy. And I was completely straight. I don't know what happened to me when I arrived in London. And in the end, there was a basement section of this restaurant, and the owners of the restaurant said to me, "Look, you've become so popular here. We'll give you the downstairs section, and you can turn it into your own club." And I said, "Okay." So that became Duffo's Dive, and which was sort of a jazz punk club. Or, I know the press called it a beatnik, a club for beatniks. I had beautiful white grand piano, and I had just two musicians. I had the bass player, Chucho Machern from Eurythmics, and Pete Townsend's band, and I had the pianist from Frankie Goes to Hollywood, both 80s bands. It was by now it was the 80s, and I was, I was firmly established as a lunatic Australian, I guess, in London.
So what triggered the move back home to Australia?
Well, I'd recorded half a dozen albums, and I'd had my share of ups and downs as you do in the music industry. And actually, when I first came back, journalists would always ask me why I came back, and to this day I still don't really have an answer. I did. I arrived, and on reflection and in hindsight, I wish I hadn't have come back, because as soon as, like within a day, a week of arriving, I thought, oh no. What have I done? I mean, I could have gone back, and in fact, there was a record company releasing a best of, or a collection of my stuff, and I was going to go back for the release of that, but I just never made it back. Oh, I went back to London a few times. I had a girlfriend over there that I went back for, and then that faded, and I ended up doing more and more in Australia. I ended up forming all these different bands in Australia, and I don't know, I just ended up getting caught up in the whole Aussie thing again.
Since you've been back, you have kept busy with a whole range of different projects and different styles. Do you get restless staying on the one thing for too long?
Yeah, I do. In fact, I was just calling people last night about starting another new thing. I mean, it's not because I like to keep changing. It's just something inherent in my makeup that makes me do these things. I never know where they're going to lead when I start them. I guess I like all the different, like I have an orchestra, which I haven't done for a little while, with girls from the Sydney Symph and Australian Opera Orchestra. I have a funk band called The Prophets. I have a glam rock band called the Alien Sex Gods, which is pretty punky. I have this jazz thing called Ground Control to Frank Sinatra, which is a thing where I take the music of David Bowie and play it like Frank Sinatra would, and the music of Frank Sinatra and play it like David Bowie.
I've heard some of that. It's a fascinating concept.
Yeah, and I've got a couple of little jazz trios. Actually, in Melbourne, on the weekend, I've got a little trio in Melbourne that I work with at Bennett's Lane, and I've got a couple of big bands as well. I recorded a couple of albums with the guys from Daly Wilson Big Band. Do you remember the Daly Wilson?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Look, I've got about probably all my bases are covered with the music. But, there's still things I'd like to do that I haven't done, probably. I even went to Japan, to Tokyo, and worked with Tokyo Symphony Orchestra doing opera, Japanese opera. I had to sing in Japanese. That was pretty exciting. So I've done a lot of different things, but not all of them are successful, obviously. But it's just, you asked me about having a restless state of mind. I guess I do. I like to keep moving on. Probably, to the detriment of some of the things. I think I jump from things before they've actually reached the obvious finale.
Yeah.
I think so.
And before people catch on to them as well.
Yeah, that's the trouble. I think I jump before people catch up with me. I think I've always done that, and then because I only find out about that later when people say, "Oh, I was just enjoying or just getting into that thing," and then you moved on to something else. But I mean, that's what I do. I don't intentionally do that. That's just what happens.
I read on the bio of your website that you have suffered from chronic insomnia over the years.
Well, I still do, really.
Yeah. So how big a problem has that been for you in terms of its effect on your career?
Well, it's good in that I can stay up and do lots of different things. It's bad in that it's pretty hard on my personal life. I mean, it's like if you know anybody who's suffered from insomnia, it's pretty difficult because it does affect you, every day, because I was going to say most people get tired. I don't really get tired, but it starts playing with your mind a little bit, because you do need to recharge your batteries by sleeping.
Yeah.
If I get a couple of hours a night, I'm lucky. Although it is improving a little bit. I think I'm becoming a bit more relaxed as I get older. It's not good for relationships, because I can, when partners are sleeping, I'm running around the house or the apartment because I can't sleep.
Mm.
I mean, I've written a book I've been looking for a publisher. I did have a publisher for a while, and then I stopped pursuing that because I got really busy. I went away and started travelling again, and that's finished. And I guess one of the reasons the book came about was because I, through my insomnia, staying up all night just writing, which took about 5 years, I guess, that book. But it is getting better, actually, the sleep thing. And also, I'm very, very physical. Like I play tennis nearly, every other day. I've always played a lot of sport, and I love sport. And like in saying that I don't sleep much, I still have boundless energy, probably more energy than anybody still. So I don't know what's wrong with my system, but it's I have the desire to start playing cricket again as well, if I can, because I'm lucky where I live in Elizabeth Bay. I overlook the harbour, and there's the tennis courts are just at the bottom of my apartment, and there's a big cricket field where they play cricket.
Very convenient.
Yeah.
Mm. Over the years, do you think there's been any great misconceptions held about you by either the press or just the music public in general that you'd like to put right?
Yeah, well, I mean, most people, even today, still think I'm gay. And, I've had some of the most beautiful girlfriends. In fact, Holly Valance.
Yeah.
Her mum was my girlfriend, first serious girlfriend in Australia for quite a few years. And I lived with her for a while. Rachel Stevens, and she's there for a while. I thought, gee, maybe Holly was my child. I guess that's one misconception.
Yeah.
And but that still rules today. And I think that's probably because of the way I look, and the way I behave on stage.
It probably goes right back to the Kush days, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. That's where it started. I was one of the very first guys in Australia, I think, to wear makeup openly like that and dress the way I did. I remember when Kush first started, and I was wearing, leotards and makeup and fishnet stockings on stage. When we tour with, we're one of the favourite touring bands for some of the real musician type bands. Like we toured with Santana and Leon Russell, and bands like that, Osobissa, and they'd always say, Carlos Santana or Leon Russell and these musicians would say, you have to get over to America. You're too out there for Australia. And I wasn't really out there. I just looked out there, I think. So yeah, mainly that gay thing, that's a misconception. But it doesn't matter what I say or what I do. Even if I got married, people would still say that I was gay.
So what's coming up for you for the rest of this year, Jeff? What's in the books?
Well, I have a number of... Actually, I just received a new album yesterday that I've done with... once again, I didn't plan this, but I've recorded an album with an Anglican minister.
Oh.
And yesterday we had photographs taken in a church of him in his ministerial robes and me dressed as a punk. And I know that the publicist is pushing it as the priest, the minister, and the bad boy. And it's just a jazz thing. He's a jazz musician, and it's just a jazz album, mainly of standards. Although there is one of my songs on a song I wrote about Miles Davis, and that's coming out. We're releasing that. That's being launched at the Basement on 16th of August. I've got an album that I sang on with some of the guys from Deep Purple and Black Sabbath.
The Hoochie Coochie Man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, Jimmy Barnes sings on a couple of tracks too. That's coming out soon. That'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Because that's once again that's a blues-based album. Because the guy that started that, Bob Daisley, he's the guy who wrote all the songs for Gary Moore. Remember Gary Moore?
That's right, yeah.
And for Ozzy Osbourne. And he's fighting Ozzy Osbourne over the rights to some of the music, I think, at the moment.
Is that right? Oh.
He's worth a lot of money though, Bob Daisley, but he's my connection for the Hoochie Coochie thing. And in fact, I called Bob Daisley last week because I was going to do The Basement. Have asked me if I'd perform the Lou Reed album Transformer in its entirety.
Oh.
And I asked Bob, of course it would be great to have somebody from Black Sabbath and Uriah Heep played with too, in doing that, because he's the same sort of vintage.
Yeah.
And yeah, he said he'd be interested in doing that. And I've got, I've written, my favourite thing I think that I'm doing is I've written and recorded an album with a guy from a band who used to play in a band in Australia called Skunk Hour. I don't know if you remember them, the Sydney sort of funk band.
Yep.
Anyway, we've recorded these songs which are a little bit like Radiohead and Massive Attack. And that's really exciting for me because it's a, completely original thing, and it's new style of music for me. I try to sing at the top end of my register and not in a big voice, more a lighter voice. So that's a different style of music for me as well. And he's very clever, the keyboard player. He just sends me these loops and backtracks, emails them to me, and just says, there you are. It might be 3 or 4 minutes or 5 minutes of groove, and he just says, write a lyric and a melody and cut it up and turn it into a song.
There you go. Wow. And
that's, I love doing that. It's my favourite way of writing. I don't even have to speak to anybody, or communicate. They just leave me to my own devices.
Hey Jeff, thanks so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat with you this morning.
It's a pleasure.
Always admired the diversity of your work and the fact you're one of the most unique performers we've ever produced in this country. And I hope there's many more years of it to come yet.
Yeah, I'm just starting. I feel like I think I'm more productive now than, well, I know I am. I've got half a dozen albums coming out in the next 6 months, including the Kush stuff. The Kush stuff will be great.
Of course, yeah. Look forward to that. Thanks again, Jeff.
Pleasure, John. Thank you.
Take care. We'll stay in touch.
All right, cheers.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.